Jorge Sedano does a great job, co-host of NBA Lockdown podcast. Also, you can catch him and hear him, the morning show host, ESPN Radio Los Angeles. This is his time to shine. I mean, it's a long, grinded-out season, but you know what, my friend? You made it to the finals. Congratulations.
We're here, and we're here for the main event. That's what everybody wanted to see anyway, so.
Listen, I think this is exactly what the NBA wanted. As you alluded to, the regular season is long. The playoffs didn't have a ton of juice, but, these two teams really didn't break a sweat. You get the trilogy. It's like a great fight. It's Ward. It's Gotti. We get number 3 tonight. I guess the easy question to kind of start off is, a lot of people think Golden State goes in as a prohibited favorite. I still think Cleveland is an outstanding team. The question is, if you were to handicap the series to start off, what does Cleveland need to do to not only have a puncher's chance in this one, but win this?
This is going to sound really weird because it goes against LeBron's nature, but he needs to score. Like, he needs to take the lead scoring for them to have a chance to win. When he's faced the Warriors, the more assists he has, the games he has the most assists are the games that they tend to lose. Because LeBron, what will end up happening is will pound the ball a little longer than he normally does, and it gets them out of the regular flow of their offense. So when he's aggressive, I think that's when they're at their best, particularly against the Warriors. So it would have to be that. LeBron's going to have to put up 30, I'm talking about like 32, 35 points a game, something like that.
Last year,
which is out of the norm for him, obviously.
Last year, I think it was a touch under 29 or so. And you're right. I mean, we always talk about him being the facilitator of the basketball, but he's got to be that LeBron where early on in his career was criticized if he was giving up the shot. Now he's got to be that LeBron late in his career where be a little more selfish, right? It's not that he doesn't have confidence in some of these guys, because I think Kevin Love's playing perhaps his best basketball of his Cleveland tenure, and you still got Kyrie, superstar, and you have those role players. But in your estimation, it's got to be LeBron, it's got to be LeBron, it's got to be LeBron.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's clearly the best player on the floor, right? And I think he can impose his will unlike anybody else on the floor. So, I just think that he needs to take care of that on the offensive end. I also think, defensively, I have a lot of concerns with Cleveland. Like, I just look at them defensively. Kyrie is not a great defender. He's going to have to step up in a huge way. I think Kevin Love, who he guards, I think is a big question mark. Like, I know they put him on Iguodala last year. I don't know if that's going to be helpful for him, because Andre has had 9 days of rest now going into this series, even though he's older. I think they've struggled in transition, defending the transition bucket. So I think those are some of the things that I would worry about. The Cavs, if I recall correctly, were the seventh worst team in transition defense in the entire league, and clearly the Warriors want to get up and down.
You bring up a great point, and it's the argument I've had for the last several months where people say you don't have to play defense. They'll turn. No, it's a playoffs. It's the NBA Finals now. It's a different animal. And to your point with Iguodala, and we don't know if he's going to be 100%, but I look at Iguodala and the fact that he's only shot 9 of 26. I should say actually 3 of 27 from beyond the arc in the playoffs. To me, he's one of those X factors too, George, because he kind of unlocks Golden State's, I don't want to say potent offense, but kind of one of those scary offenses where if he starts nailing down his shots, now you got to come out, you got to play a little more perimeter defense. You'll get some mismatches here. I think Iguodala is certainly one of the keys going forward. Not the ultimate key, but to me, it bears worth watching if he starts knocking down his shots early on.
Oh, no question. I mean, look, I don't think he needs to be the MVP guy he was a couple of years ago. That would be nice, obviously, for them. But that's just not his role on this particular team. He's more of the defensive stopper, kind of the Swiss Army knife, right? Can do a little bit of everything. But, yeah, for sure. I think that him and Sean Livingston are big for them off the bench. That's kind of what they do. That's kind of their core, along with the 4 guys that are in the starting lineup. So, yeah, look, I think all that stuff matters. I think that the other area of concern I think that I would have for Cleveland defensively is, the Warriors, man, they are unbelievable as far as what they do off the ball when guys don't have the ball in their hands, and the movement and the cutting and the screening and all that stuff. Kobe Bryant did a really good job. If you go on his Twitter, he does these kind of short videos for us at ESPN, like these short films, and he kind of broke down the Warriors' offense a little bit. It's called the Golden Democracy, and it just really goes into real detail, like film study, as to why the Warriors make you pay defensively unlike any other team in the league right now. It's a good watch if people want to see it.
Now, again, excellent point, because, where the Warriors are at their best is not only when they get out there, transitional offense and the buckets, and they get up and down the floor, but when you start to get some of the guard play and they start to penetrate, the one, I would say, Achilles heel with Cleveland, you mentioned their defense, they're also a slow rotating perimeter defense. I mean, we saw it at times, a couple moments against the Boston Celtics, and especially in the one game where they lost, where they were slow to rotate and guard the three-point ball. We know Golden State, they live and die by the three-point ball, which kind of leads me into this. Now you're talking that added dimension they didn't have last year in Kevin Durant. Kind of a two-pronged question. How much pressure is there on Durant to come up big in this series? I'm not necessarily saying to lead them to a championship, but how much pressure is going to be on his back, and how much of the offense do you think is going to run through him?
Listen, I think there's pressure on him, right, because of the move. He's trying to kind of shoo that away, but that's going to be there. And I think he's accepted that. Whether he wants to admit that or not publicly is one thing. But, yeah, there's definitely pressure on him. But I think there's pressure on LeBron, too. And some of it, if not most of it, he's put on himself at this point about chasing ghosts, right? Like, those are his words, and chasing Jordan and championships and whatnot. He's kind of shooed that away a little bit recently, too, saying that he doesn't have to validate his career anymore. Well, wait a second. Which is it, right? Like you said earlier in the season, you're the one chasing ghosts. Now you don't need to validate your career. I don't think he needs to validate it. I don't think he needs to validate his career. I just would like for him to get his message straight. I think that's the only thing I would ask for, is some consistency there. I mean, look, he's allowed to change his mind, I guess, but it just seems like a weird dichotomy there. But with Durant, yeah, look, do they have to run the offense through him? Maybe at times, because I think what happens is the game will slow down and get muddied a little bit, and you need a guy that can create on his own occasionally, even though that's contrary to what the Warriors do best. But every once in a while, you're going to get into that kind of scrap. So you're going to need a guy who can create his own shot, and he clearly is able to do that. Yeah, and you go back to Love. If he hangs defensively, say he's guarding Pachulia, and then when the starters match up, he slides over to Iguodala when the Warriors maybe shift Green to center, and they go with some different lineups. Like, this is where, I look at this and I say, man, when you have a head coach in Steve Kerr, this is a guy that we've seen in the past that will mix and match. I mean, they'll go to the bench, he'll sit guys, he'll start guys, he'll rest guys. I think to me, that's not really being, maybe you guys are talking about it, but from our view, it doesn't seem like we're hearing a lot about that. You talk about the coaching styles and the fact, like a head coach in Steve Kerr has no problems in the past where he'll sit, he'll mix and match, and he'll shift guys around. He doesn't have an issue with that, and more times than not, it's worked. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that, and look, Mike Brown is basically kind of writing this out, right? Yep. Steve is very much involved. Obviously, there's going to be in-game things that Mike has to do, but you've seen Steve involved at halftime in these situations. So there's going to be a sense of Steve Kerr's hand and imprint is going to still be on this on a day-to-day basis for these games, even though he may not have the ability to micromanage the situation, but he just doesn't do that anyway. Like, people think, like, I thought about it initially. Like, I thought that Mike Brown's transition could hurt them, and the reason I thought that is because two things. There's a margin of error for every great team, right? And when you don't have your starting head coach who is a guy who's been there for several years, has built up equity in that locker room with these guys, and if he has to make a tough decision to bench somebody, it goes off a little easier, right? It goes over a little easier because he's been in charge for so long. That may not be the case with Mike Brown. But what's happened here is Mike may have to make those tough decisions, but he's going to make those decisions with the backing of Steve Kerr. And if I don't see that being like, I don't see those two guys clashing. It's not in Mike's personality. It's not in Steve's personality. And Steve is so hands off in general with the way those guys play the game in game. Like, he's not the guy who's micromanaging timeouts and calling a million plays from the sideline. He lets those guys kind of read and react, similar to what Phil Jackson's Laker teams and Bulls teams used to do with the triangle when the triangle was more in vogue. The Warriors run a number of triangle type schemes. So, and a lot of it is based on the read and react that you do in those particular offenses. So Mike, I think at first, it's funny, Steve was talking about this the other day, that Mike was kind of like, man, you're not calling more plays. And he's like, nah, man, I let these guys just kind of, do their thing because they're smart players and I can trust them on the floor.
Two more for you before I let you get out of here. One on the series itself, then one on your Lakers out there with Mr. Ball in a moment. But are you leaning towards Golden State, or do you believe Cleveland makes this a series? It's a competitive series, and maybe we get a seventh game?
No, I think the Warriors win fairly easily as far as the amount of games. I do think there'll be competitive games within the series, but I do think the Warriors end this thing quickly. It's going to be Warriors in 5, because it's funny. We've been sitting here talking about like, oh, the playoffs stink, and but we'll get the trilogy. We'll get the trilogy that we want, and we'll get the heavyweight brawl. But I don't think the heavyweight brawl is going to last that long. I got to be honest. Again, the individual games may be good, but I just don't think the result at the end will be what people expect. I kind of liken it a lot to what we saw with the Spurs and Heat a couple of years ago, where Miami won that epic series where Ray Allen hit the shot in Game 6, and then Miami came in and was able to win Game 7 at home. They kind of stole that series, right? A lot like the way the Cavs stole the series last year. And I think that, man, I remember that San Antonio team, even through the first 2 games of the next series, Rich, I remember thinking, you know what? If that air conditioning thing wouldn't have happened, Miami could be coming home 2-0.
That's right.
And the air conditioning thing, we could do a whole other show on that, by the way. Like, that was tremendous. But, yeah, like, I think that, the series will be competitive early on. Like, you'll be like, ooh, this is going to be a good one. And then it's just the Warriors are just going to wipe the floor with them after they kind of get a flow going and a feel for the series. And that's exactly what San Antonio did in 2014, because the Cavs and that Heat team remind me a lot of each other. There's older role players. Yeah, Kyrie's better than Dwayne was at that stage of his career. But, I would still take a healthy Chris Bosh over Kevin Love all day, every day. And I know Chris obviously is dealing with some other issues, but Chris, you never had to worry about Chris on the defensive end, right? Like Chris, those years that LeBron played in Miami with Chris, the last 3 years, Chris was the best pick and roll defender in the league.
Both sides of the floor.
I don't think enough people know that and talk about that, and Kevin is not that.
No.
So, but they had a lot of older role players, and this Cavs team has a lot of older role players. Defensively, that Heat team, even though they were way better than this Cavs team, they were leaky compared to the 3 teams that had played before, who were top 3 or 4 on defense in the league at that time. They suffered back to, I think, the 12 spot. This Cavs team was 22nd in the league during the regular season, and I don't believe they were really tested by a real offensive team in the postseason. Boston a little bit, because Brad Stevens runs really great schemes, but now you're going to face a team that runs as good as schemes, if not better, with much better talent. And I think just Cleveland's going to be in trouble because of that.
And we always talk about that intangible, right? That X factor you can't put a price tag on. The fact that Golden State blew a 3-1 lead last year.
Revenge. Absolutely.
And that's why I think they come. I actually think they blow them out tonight in Game 1. But we'll see how it plays out. Listen, before I let you get out of here, real quick, in your backyard with the Lakers. So is it a foregone conclusion that they're going to draft Lonzo Ball? I mean, is it the worst kept secret, or
foregone conclusion? Well, I would say
99%.
Yeah, but I think it's going to happen. Yeah, I think they're enamored by Lonzo. I think that Magic feels like, and this is what Lonzo does, right? Like he was really good at this at UCLA, and if you watched him play any high school ball, you can kind of see this too. Lonzo's not a get my shot off guy first. Like, he's a guy that gets people involved, puts guys in the right position. He's an unbelievable passer for his age. And it's not just about the type of crazy fun passes he makes. It's about just even the regular passes he
and the
makes.
Right pass.
He the right pass, but he puts the ball right where guys need it to get the shot off quickly or to make a move quickly, right off the dribble. And I think that's what you don't get very much in today's NBA from that position. He's kind of a little bit of a throwback in that sense, and I think Magic is enamored by that because they feel like they've got some young talent that can score, but they just need somebody that can put them in the right spots.
I know, in about 20 seconds before I let you get out of here, I know it's kind of been beaten to death in this regard. Are there any reservations drafting him and then possibly having to deal with LeVar going forward if, say, he struggles or he goes on social media, or if it's the learning curve, because this kid's going to have a bullseye on his back regardless? Or is it, listen, the talent alone, it's too good to pass up?
Yeah, I don't think Magic and those guys are worried about LeVar. I think that LeVar is very respectful of Magic. He has been. Look, he's been on my show a million times. Like, we actually were the first show to put him on anywhere. So like he's never been shy about his respect for Magic Johnson. We had Magic on recently, and Magic talked about it. They don't feel worried about LeVar. Rob Pelinka was on with us too, and he doesn't feel like he worries about that at all. Rob, by the way, I mean, people forget Rob Pelinka was the sixth man on the Fab Five Michigan team.
That's right.
Whose dad, by the way, was a big-time high school coach.
Yep.
So, he talked to us about how, look, man, like, I wasn't Lonzo Ball, but I came from a family whose dad was a head coach for a long time. So I know what it's like to have the dad who's pushing you. And even though he's not LeVar, personality-wise, he was like LeVar in a lot of ways. So, like, I get that kind of whole culture of having the guy who's the dad who's been the coach. So I think that they're prepared for what may come with that. They're also going to meet with Lonzo, and I think they just want to get a feel for Lonzo, who, by the way, if you talk to him, and I have, he really is a good kid.
Seems like a shy kid, kind of reserved, kind of kept to himself.
And when you bring up the dad, he's always like, it's just my dad being my dad. And, like, he just gets back to talking basketball. Like, he is really focused on basketball. So I think the kid's a good kid. He's a good player. I don't know if he's going to be an all-time great, but I think he's going to be a very good player in this league for a long time.
George, great stuff, man. I really appreciate the extended time. We'll definitely check out, of course, NBA Lockdown Podcast. Catch out there on the West Coast with ESPN Radio Los Angeles. What about Nacion, right? You still?
Yeah, we're back on Monday.
All right.
We're on a little hiatus because I had some time off, but we're back on Monday. And
the man that wears many hats.
Yes, many hats. I'll be on Sports Station tomorrow too. Actually,
there you go. We love the shameless plugs.
Yeah, no doubt. So check that out at 3. I think it's 3:30 Eastern on ESPN.
You got it, brother. I appreciate a couple of moments. Hopefully, the series goes a little longer than anticipated. We'll talk again.
You got it. Anytime.
You got it. All right, Jorge Sedano. Good stuff.